Okay, it is 2 o'clock. So out of 44 people, we have nine show up. So that's how meetup goes. That's one of the complaints here in Nashville is people will buy pizza. So they'll see 100 people are signed up for something, and so they'll buy pizza for 100 people, and then 20 people sign up, and they've got way too much pizza. So if you're gonna do meetup, do be careful of that. Okay, so do that here. Host tools. Allow participants not to unmute themselves. Okay. Cool, dude. Oh, I got a couple more people come in. Got 11 now. 11 out of 44. Exciting stuff. Okay, so this is our what is this? This is our next class in the Python series. So basically what I'm trying to do with these classes is I'm trying to step us along on a path so we can start building cooler and cooler things, right? So at this point, we know the basics of variables, we know the basics of concatenation, we know the basics of if-else statements, we know the basics of lists and dictionaries and loops. And today we're going to be reading and writing to files. And this is where you start to get to do something that's actually a little bit interesting and a little bit dynamic. And we're going to keep going from here. And so now that we're going to know how to read and write to files, next week we're going to learn how to do HTML. So we're going to have the introduction to HTML class on Tuesday. And then we're going to have an introduction to CSS class. And CSS actually does all the styling, things with that have colors, where stuff shows up on the screen, that type of this thing is from CSS. So they're going to learn that. And then the class after that, we're probably going to learn Bottle. Bottle is a web app framework. And the idea is I'm trying to kind of take us down this path where you start to actually get to build things. Because I think the faster you get to building something that at least seems useful to you, the better. The biggest problem that I had when I first started learning coding is, again, I got my MCSE back in 2000. I had finished my electronics program in the US Army, one of the longest programs they had. And so I decided I was going to learn coding. So I went out and I got myself a C++ in 24 hours book. I went through the C++ in 24 hours book and then I had no idea what the hell to do with it at the end, and didn't go back to programming for about another 8 years because it was like, okay, I know what a class is. I don't know what to do with that though. So one of my hopes here is to get you moving, and that's one of the things with the labs, get you moving in the direction to actually build something. So at least you can start to truly conceive why this stuff is actually valuable, and it just doesn't stay an abstract thing. Again, what I'll tell you is a lot of people, when they get into the world of technology and they get in the world of programming, right, you'll hear that a lot of people fail, right? I wasn't good enough. I failed at programming or I failed at networking or whatever else. The reality is it's more that people give up, right? So if you're running a race, and you break your leg, you fail. We're not the Navy SEALs. You break your leg in a race, you fail, right? You tried and you fail. If you're running along, oh, and then your breath is getting a little short, and oh, I don't know, maybe your hamstring. I don't know, my hamstring doesn't feel perfect, and then you're like, yeah, well, maybe I shouldn't do this race, and then you stop. That wasn't failing. That was you giving the hell up. And that's a big thing I see with a lot of people that get into the world of technology is really it's not that they failed. It's not that they couldn't do it or whatever else. It's not that they're dyslexic. I mean, I don't know if you're dyslexic, but again, like there's people with certain learning disabilities, certain vision disabilities, they might not be able to do it and they might truly fail. What I see with most people is they do it and basically they just get to a certain point where they give up. Like they don't see how this is valuable. They don't see why they should get paid for it. It's just tiring and frustrating, the rest of it. And they're like, screw it, I give up. But then they say they failed. They didn't fail. They gave up. So that's why I'm trying to get you to do stuff as practical as possible, as quickly as possible. So yes, so today's class is going to be Python reading and writing to files. So this is going to be a big thing. So I talk about data stores quite a bit. So when we start talking about architecture, we're not really to the architecture classes. I love talking about architecture. We're not really to the architecture classes yet. But basically, when we're talking about architecture, what we're doing is we're separating out the fundamental components or resources that are required for your application to do whatever the hell it's supposed to do. So you hear about compute, right? A compute resource. So the compute resource is the actual CPU, possibly a GPU, that does the processing, right? So if I'm going to be encoding videos, that is compute heavy. So I put the video file somewhere that runs through a compute resource. It outputs it somewhere else, and so that's the compute, right? One of the big things is data stores. And so that's the thing is what a data store is where is your data stored, right? And the thing to find out when you start doing programming is it could be any number of places. So the data store could be a database, you have relational databases, NoSQL databases, all kinds of databases out there. That might be your data store where your data is stored. If you're dealing with videos and images and files, your data store, again, maybe on AWS, it may be in something called a volume, something like that. Basically, you put the data into that, and that is where the data is stored. What we're going to be working with today is files. So you can actually store data into files. And so there's something called a CSV file, a comma separated value file. And you can use this as a very, very, very basic type of database type system where basically you can take values from the user or you can parse information. You can have your code read information from a file and take that and then store that into something called a CSV file that'll store basically things that look like records. And then you're able to pull information out of that CSV file much like you would a database. And so one of the things you are going to need to be thinking about whenever you develop your applications is what is the data store that you need, right? The more powerful your data store is, the more functionality your data store has, the more complicated it is for you to set up and for you to maintain. Again, a big thing to be thinking about in the technology world. It's not simply about what you are able to do, like what you are able to do now, but it's also what you will be able to maintain over your life with the company. And more importantly, when you hand all this crap off to the next person, what they will be able to maintain. And so you hear a lot of people out there, and they'll be like, I won't use anything less than a relational database, Postgres, or something like that. Like, it depends. It depends on, how important it is, right? If you just need a very simple place to write information to and read information from, literally a text file, which might be a much better way to deal with that, right? Think about like security and things, like, oh, you want to make sure all your data is secure. Well, if all you're doing is storing values for the size of the font, the color of the font, a couple of other things, do you really need big security for doing that kind of stuff? Or can you just dump that into a text file and who the hell cares if the hacker gets it? These are some of the things that you need to be thinking about. Again, once you start actually building stuff in the real world. Okay, so let's start talking about this with Python. So default file paths. So one of the big things is you have to know where when you run your Python script, where by default is your script going to be able to read files from or write files to. One of the problems you can have is you can create your little script to write a file, and then it writes a file, and God knows where it puts it. Right? It's like you write it, and then you expect it to be in the same directory as the file, the script that you're running. And sometimes, based off the configuration of the server, it's being stored somewhere entirely else. So that's something that you have to be careful about. There is a module called OS. I use OS a lot going in the future with a function of get current working directory. And basically this will show you what your current working directory is. So we go here and I find my script. So this is a very, very simple script. So we're going to import the OS module, and then we're going to print out. So we're going to call the OS module with the get current working directory function. And this, just to show you, is going to tell you what your current working directory is, right? Uh-oh. Did I fuck my current? Damn it. Well, this class might get interesting. My current working directory was supposed to be something else. Anyways, so yes, so this is showing me my current working directory is users/Eli. I hope today's class goes well. The current working directory was supposed to be something else. And again, this is one of the things you need to do is verify what certain configurations are. So anyways, so by default, we're gonna see how this goes today. By default, it should either read or write files that are only in that particular root directory. And I'm not sure why it's giving that right now. So anyways, but that's right, something to look at. Uh, let's see here. If you want to change the directory, we're not changing the directory today because I do not need to try to help troubleshoot all of you folks. You can do os.chddir with whatever directory you want to point to, and that is a way to change the current directory that your script is working at. Again, to either save files or read files. So let's go to reading files. So basically, we're going to go to read files. There's two ways to do this. There's a with open function, or basically just a file open function. We're going to show you how to do both of these. The reason you would use the with open function here is because basically what happens is it'll run through your code block. And when it gets done with running through your code block, it'll automatically close out the file. So one of the things you have to be thinking about with programming, thankfully, we're in the 2020s, so this isn't as bad as it used to be, but you can have a big issue in programming with what are called leaks. So memory leaks used to be a huge issue back when I started in formal IT, back with that MCSE. And basically what a memory leak is every time your program goes to do something, it needs to reserve a certain amount of memory from your RAM. So in your RAM, there's actually blocks of RAM. So depending on what you're doing, again, we talk about those variables and those data types, whether you're dealing with ints or whether you're dealing with strings or whatever else, you actually need a place in the RAM to put that information. And so with the programming languages, basically what you would do is you would reserve that amount of RAM for this process that you're running. And then at the end of it, you're supposed to release that RAM so it can be used by another process. What a memory leak is basically where your program reserves this amount of RAM for whatever it's supposed to do, and then it reserves some more RAM, and then it reserves some more RAM, and then it reserves some more RAM. And basically, even though the RAM, that part isn't actually being used by the program anymore, since it was never released by the program, you start using more and more and more and more and more RAM. And literally, our computers used to crash because there would be memory leaks. And what would happen with these memory leaks is, at a certain point, all the RAM on your system was being used, or all the RAM had been allocated and had not been released, and your entire computer crashes. And the same thing you have to worry about here with files. So if you do with open and then you open your file, when it gets done with the code block, it's supposed to release the file and let it go back to the system. If you do the file equals open, do this way, you have to use a file.close to basically close that file again so that something else is able to open up that file. And if you do not close the file, then you can get weird problems because basically you open the file, it's continuously being used, you never close the file again, and you can get some wonkiness going on. That's one of the big things here. You're going to notice whenever we're opening a file, so whether we're reading to a file or we're writing to a file, you'll notice there's open. We're going to say what the file name is, comma, single quotation, and inside there will either be R, W, or A. And it's very important you think about how you're using this. So basically, this is how the file is being opened. So if you open it as an R, this is basically the file is simply going to be read. And so this is useful, again, when you start thinking about security. So everybody's worried about cybersecurity nowadays. Well, it's simple things like this are very useful for security. If you open a file and you only open it as a read, right, then there's less likelihood somebody is going to be able to get in there and screw with your file. So if you open it as read, basically you're simply able to read to the file in this code block, you are not able to write to it. Then you have W. So there's W and A. So W means overwrite. You have to be careful. So with overwrite, what that means is basically if the file doesn't exist, it will be created. And anything that is in the file, so if the file already exists and there's something there or a lot of something there, if you use W in order to open the file, all of that will be overwritten or simply deleted. So you open it with W, all of that information should be deleted as soon as it's opened, and so it's gone. So you have to be careful with this. So if you're going to be using this type of thing as like a log file, you're going to continuously be putting information in. If you do overwrite for every time you're putting information in, then you're only going to have whatever the last entry is because it will continuously be overwritten. Then you have A. A is append, and so all A does is basically it appends to the end of the document, of the file that you're writing to. So record 1 will be here, and record 2 will be here, and record 3 will be here, so on and so forth. It goes from top basically to bottom. And then you can add, in the same script, you can use W and A's together. So let's say you wanted to create a new file, but then you needed to loop through in order to add information in the file. You could open the file with W, let's say write some header information, and then open the file as A and do a loop, and then loop through and print everything from all the indexes in that list or that dictionary. If we go over, take a look at this, it's the open.py. So this is that particular script. And so this is basically what this looks like. All right, so everything in green right now is commented out. Do not worry about it right this second. So with open, and so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be opening a file called fake data.csv. So this is called a CSV file, and again, it's a comma separated value. So up here we have what the column names are: first name, last name, age, email, gender, and shirt size. And so we see Joseph, comma, Bowen, comma, 47, comma, email address, comma, female, comma, extra small. Right, and so basically this gives us records. If you want this type of data, I will tell you, OpenAI is very useful for this type of data. Again, to be clear, OpenAI is not AI. It still can be useful for a lot of things. If you are looking for just kind of crappy data for you to be able to play with, that's basically where I got this from. I told it I want a first name, I want a last name, I want an age, I want an email address, I want a gender, and I want a shirt size. I want it in a CSV format, and I want 50 records. And 2 seconds later, it gave me this. So this can be a useful thing. God knows, God knows where it came up with those email addresses from, but that's not my problem. So anyways, this is what the CSV file looks like. If we go over, again, we take a look at this. So, okay. So with open, single quotation marks, we're going to open fake-data.csv. That is in this folder. Hopefully this is going to work, and we're going to run it as read. So that, and then we give it a name as file. So what we're doing here is we are declaring the variable file, and then we're setting the value as whatever the hell comes out of this from open. And then what we're going to do is we're going to simply print file as it is. Now, when we do this, file, when it comes in, is an object. Everything in Python apparently is an object. Just one of those things just to kind of keep in mind. Anyways, if we do the run button here, yeah, no such directory. What? Anyways, hold on one second. I genuinely do not know what I did with my current working directory, but we'll deal with it. So if you have this problem, so let me go there. Let me go read and write to files. Let me grab my fake copy. We're going to go to Eli. We're going to paste this here. So again, so when I said, what is my current working directory? It's telling me it is my user root directory. Oh, that's why. See, this is where you gotta be careful. I fuck up so that you don't have to. Again, smart people learn from their own dumbassedness. Wise people learn out from the dumbassedness of other people. So I have a computer right here that Zoom is running through, and this is my fancy 2023 Uber MacBook Pro. And this is what I write everything on, and this is what I do testing on everything on. And then here's my lab computer. This is my lab computer. So when I was doing all the verifications and everything today, I was verifying on this computer. And now I'm trying to teach you on this computer. And that's why we're getting some problems. Anyways, that is the issue. Okay, let me close this. Let me run this again. There we go. So we're going to open fake-data CSV. That is now in my UI folder as file. We're going to print that out, and now we're going to get this. So this is the information for simply an object. io.text io wrapper equals fake data CSV, mode R, encoding UTF-8. Great, that doesn't actually do anything for us. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment that line out and comment this line back in. And so when we're reading a file, so here we just have the file as an object and whatever. So the read, so dot read, parentheses, this is a method, and this method turns that object, everything in there, into a string variable value. So we're going to print out, so it's going to be file.read. Now this is going to be a string variable value. When I go to print that, we are now going to see all of this information here, and it basically more or less looks like the CSV file because that's literally what it is. So I went there, I grabbed the file, we turned that into a string variable, and now it's coming up here on the screen. But the problem is you look at that, and this isn't too bad, right? You know, if I want to grab like all the email addresses or something, I can probably go in here, do a little scripted, grab all the email addresses from the string. But it's not really great, right? Because again, these are records. These are records. And so a string is basically one thing. That's hard to deal with, right? Especially if you're dealing with records. So wouldn't it be nicer if we could turn this into a list? What if every line in the CSV file was a value in an index in a list, and then we can simply iterate them through all of those different records. And that's what read lines does. So we go here. Da-da. So we can do print file. So we take the file object. We said read lines. And so what read lines does is it takes every line in that file and turns it into a value in a list. And then when we run this, it looks a lot uglier, but it's actually easier to deal with, right? So now we get all this. And we see down here, so it closes a square bracket there. Somewhere it opens the square bracket here. And if you go through here, so we open a single quotation mark, we go all the way over, we close a single quotation mark. So this is one value in this list, comma. So this is at index 0, comma. Joseph Bowen, again, single quotation mark, all the way to single quotation mark. Now all of this is at index 1 in the list, so on and so forth. So you can now go through there and see where everything was separated off. Then what we can do is we can come down and we're going to actually do some we're going to do some stuff and a couple of examples a little bit forward. But here I just want to show you then how you can interact with each individual line. Right. So for x, so this is simply a for loop. So this variable name could be whatever you want. I'm just calling it x. So for x in file.read lines. So this is a list. What we're going to do is we're going to print f string. I'm simply going to do like 3 arrows just so you can see that I'm adding something to each line. And then I will print out the value for that particular line. We go through here then. This will then step through and basically see arrow, 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 space, and then the record. Arrow, 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 space, and then the record. Arrow, 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 space, and then the record, and then the record, and then the record, and the record. Now you might be sitting here and you're wondering, okay, well that makes sense. So I understand the arrows and the record, but why is there the additional space here? This is something we'll talk about in future classes about how to do things like clean up text, basically clean up data. Why that is there is if we go back and we do the file.read lines, well, you'll notice here, right? So these are all values in the list. But you see this /n here? That is a next line value. What the next line value means is in ASCII or UTF-8, basically go down another line. So what's kind of happening here as it's going through that list and it's printing out each value in the list, every time it prints out a value in the list, that goes onto its own line. And then on top of that, it has a next line character. So that's why it's adding the spaces between all of those values as you go through. And so this is where, again, taking a look at the data that you're dealing with, this can show you why you're getting some weird problems, if you're getting some weird problems. Then basically down here, this kind of sort of gets you to the same location. Oops. It's just using the different way. So here what we do, so this is the kind of like the old way of opening a file. So we do file equals open the fake data CSV as a read. We then print out the value. So just like we were printing out here, the difference is we actually have to close, right? If we do not close this file at the end, all kinds of stupidity can ensue. So unless there is a reason for you to do it this way, this is the far better way, because what you're going to learn when you do coding is that if you can forget something, you will forget something, and you'll generally do it many, many, many times a day. So if you can take out the necessity to actually do something like close the file, that is going to be better for you. Again, this is where we talked about before, the difference between syntax and style. And again, this is a very important thing, especially once you start becoming a coder, is so many people hyper-focus on the technical concept. Again, how do I open a file? How do I do that kind of thing? But there's the syntax, how you're able to do it. But then there's this style, why did you choose the way to do things that you did? And this is going to be important for whatever environment that you go into. Again, when you go into an organization and they already have a way for writing their code, basically what you're going to do is you're going to write the code the way you want that they want you to write the code, even if it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to you. So that's what the read. Let's see here. From there, I think we got all of that. Yep. And that's the other thing. Yeah, we'll deal with that later. Yeah, so then we're going to talk about parsing a CSV file. Again, whenever we talk about parsing, basically this is where your script goes through and it tries to read a file that you give it to pull out whatever information that you need. And again, the important thing with parsing files is that you come up with some kind of standardized way to do it so that whoever is designing the code to pull information out can do that relatively easily. I had a buddy of mine that created a startup company, and he was pulling out like health records, or it was like the health inspector records for restaurants. And one of the interesting problems that he ran into is especially apparently every single county in the country, every county, not state, county, literally has their own data formatting for how they store the information about health records for restaurants. And so his problem as a startup wasn't actually writing the damn code. He could write that code all day long. The problem is that he had to write it all day long because he literally, for every single county he was trying to pull information from, he had to go through and he had to format his script to line up with the data that they had. And again, so this is going to be an important thing to be thinking about when you start creating, again, applications for organizations, or if you're going to be creating data that's going to be going out and being used by other people. One of the things to look at is just like what is kind of the standardized way people are presenting data, and unless there's a reason not to do that, you might just want to follow along so people know what's happening. Anyways, so we have the read lines method, as we had before. So if you're going to parse a CSV file, you want to turn every single line into its own index and a list. So it basically turns into a record. But remember, each one of those indexes in the list, that is now a string. That's now a string. Again, you can do some stuff with it. You can do some basic if-else statements off of that, but that's not the most useful thing in the world. So what's really cool here is we can also use a method called split. So once we have that string with all those comma separated values, right? The comma is something that we can do something with. So what split does, the method, is it says turn this string into a list, and each index in that list is going to be separated by wait a minute. Did I drop out? Did something happen? I'm on. I don't know. My computer just told me recording's in progress, so that doesn't make me feel the best. All right. Well, nobody's raising their hand, so okay. We're going to assume everything's following along. Okay, so R. Okay, so with open fake-data.csv, we're going to open it for read, and we're going to open it as a variable named file. File is going to equal file.readlines. So basically, we're going to take the file variable, we're going to send it through the readlines method, so they'll turn every line into an index, and then we're going to assign that new list to file as a list. Once we've done that, we can print out the values as specific indexes. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print file at index 0. All right, so if we take a look at this, this is a CSV file at index 0. So index 0 is line 1. We start at 0 instead of 1. That is just going to be these basically column names here is what should print out on the screen. We go through and we then print it out. We can say, okay, first name, comma, last name, comma, age, comma, gender, comma, shirt size, blah. So that got printed out, so we know it's coming in, and you can see that. Jacques, let's see here. Jacques Stroud, Jacques.
So you fell off, it froze when you were explaining parsing. And so that's where some of us might be kind of, they haven't, but you froze for like about 2 minutes when you were talking about parsing, like those first lines. So can you go over that again really quickly, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the point of the class. Point of the class is for you guys to actually
Again?
learn. Okay, parsing.
Yes, you froze again.
Rewind. Okay. Okay, so we're talking about parsing. So basically what parsing is.
All right. You froze again. Great.
I did? I see me. Does anybody else see me? Your internet connection is unstable. God damn it. Hold on a second. This is one of those days. Can you see me now? Dancing. Can you see me now? Yes? No? Okay, thumbs up from anybody. Can anybody see me? Can anybody see me? Okay, we had thumbs up from Christian. Okay. I swapped over to my phone. Spectrum Internet doesn't like me, I guess. That's his own deal. Okay. Parsing CSV. Rewinding yet again. Okay. So parsing files. So parsing files is again, this is for your computer program to actually be able to read documents and be able to go through and be able to pull information out of the documents. Formatting of documents is very important, and this is something you need to be thinking about once you start putting data into documents. It's going to be sent somewhere else. Is basically you're going to have a coder on the other side who's going to have to be able to understand the information that you're presenting to them so that they can write code that can actually do something useful with that information. The story I told, I don't know if you actually heard it, is I have a buddy of mine, or had a buddy of mine, I guess, who was creating a whole platform thing for health records for restaurants. And the interesting thing that he told me was that apparently every county in the United States actually has its own way of writing out the data for these inspections that they do for restaurants. And so although the code to create for parsing through a record was relatively easy, and he could do that all day long, the problem is he was actually doing that all day long because every county in the country had their own way of formatting the information. And so he literally had to create scripts and have specific scripts for the information that came from specific counties. And so that's some of the things to be thinking about when you're dealing with building stuff in the real world. And so that's again things like standardization. Why standardization is very important is if other companies have standardized their data output in a certain way, and that's who your customers, who your clients are using. If you standardize based on how everybody else is standardizing, it's generally a decent way to go, right? Even if it's not the most efficient technically, if everybody else is doing it that way, sometimes it's good just to do it how everybody else is doing it. So we talked about read lines. So basically what read lines is you open up that text file, it goes through. Every line in that text file is going to be an index and a list. The thing is, have that value, and that's a string value. So you have a first name, comma, last name, comma, blah, blah, blah. That is all one string. So you can do some if-else statements based off of that, but that's not the most useful thing in the world. So that's where we get the split method. And so again, what methods do is methods change variable values. And so what we can do is we can feed it the file, right? We can feed it the line that's going through, and we can say dot split for that line, and we're going to split, and we can split off of whatever character we want. So basically what we're doing is we're splitting off of a comma. So you will hear in the programming world the concept of delimiter. And what a delimiter is basically where is the end of something. And so we can use a comma as basically a delimiter. And so what we do is we have a string that has first name, last name, age, and we can go through and go comma. Okay, first name is going to be at index 0, last name is going to be at index 1, age is going to be at index 2, so on and so forth. So if we go over and we take a look at the code one more time, everybody seems to be there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So come to our code. So with open, as we did before, fake-data.csv, we're going to read, and then the name of this value is going to be file. Do we want to do file equals? We're going to run file through the read lines method to turn this object into a list. And so that is now going to be a list. Then we can print out whatever is at whatever index in that list. So now that this is a list, we can say print file for index 0. If we take a look at this, so index 0 is the first line. So it's not 1, it's 0. So 1 is 0. So basically we're going to be printing this out. First name, last name, age, email, gender. That should get printed out on the screen if everything works properly. So I go through and I do that. And we can see, okay, it gets turned into a list. We then print out the value for index 0, and that gets printed out on the screen. So again, that can be kind of useful, but it's not the most useful thing in the world. So we go down here. This is basically what the code looks like. So for record in file. So file is the list. So we're going to turn each value in the list is going to be called record. We can use square brackets. So one of the problems that we have here is that first line in the list is just the column titles, the column names. We don't actually want that really printed out with the rest of the information. So by doing the bracket 1, what we say is we want to start at index 1. So index 1 is actually index 2. Index 0 is index 1. Index 1 is actually index 2. So we say we want to start at index 1, colon, and keep going on until the end. So this is where you can say, basically give limits within that list from where you want to go to. Then we do colon. Then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to print out the record as it is. So the record here is a string. So I'm just going to print that out on the screen just so you see what that looks like. Then what we're going to do here is now we're going to turn record into a list. So we're going to do record dot split on the comma, and we're going to turn that into record. So record is now going to be a list with all of these data pieces of data at the different indexes. Then I'm just going to do a basic if statement here to show you kind of how this works. So if record 2, so if we look at record 2, we go here. So it'll be 0, 1, 2. So age will be at index 2. So we're going to say is record 2. This will be a string. So when we do this, this will come in as a string value. If we're going to do a number conditional, you can't do a number conditional against a string, so we're going to turn it into an int. So we're going to get the age, we're going to turn it into an int data type, and then we're going to say if age is greater or equal to 50, then I'm going to print out first name, last name, and age. So this will show me what the entire record looks like, and this will give me all the records above 50, and it'll say the first name, the last name, and the age of the person who's above 50. So if I go and I run this, so you can kind of get a look at it. Yep. Anyways, so okay, yeah. So first name, last name. Crap. Hold on 1 second. Did that not work right? Anyways, we'll just do it this way. Okay, so we can see here. Okay, so we can see Renee Torres, 55, email address, male, extra small, first name, last name, 55. Oh, that's why that's doing that. I'm being stupid. Okay. Lauren Maldonado, 50. Lauren Maldonado, 50. Yeah, Lauren Maldonado, 50. So this, I forget what I was doing. So anyways, it's printing out all the records. So this person's 35, this person's 30, this person's 42, this person's 55. We print out this. So might be easier for myself to remember if I do this. So basically now it's just giving me first name, last name, and age of everybody who's over 50. And then I can very easily go through and I could say, you know, give me everybody that's over 20. And basically now it goes through and it gives me everybody who's over 20. And so that's how you can use a CSV file as basically a very basic data store. Where again, let's say you have like a Rolodex or something and you're searching for a name or you're searching for an age or that type of thing, you can basically have this kind of script with a user input so they can plug in some information and then it would pull out any of the records that match whatever it is that you're asking for. Oh, Jacques, please tell me I did not drop off. Yes, Jacques.
No, you did not. So thank you. So basically, so I just want to make sure I understand this. I'm sorry if I'm delaying anyone else. So basically, we're taking lists and dictionaries and CSV files and using them as a way to parse, like get their information out. And you're saying that the read function, the print file, read or read lines is a way some companies might display their information. We just have to try to figure out which way they're doing that. So I have two questions. Is it stupid to try to take the information, convert it to like what you have on the screen now to be able to pull the information out and then put it back to the way that they had it? Is that efficient? And secondly, a lot of these files that like even when I come in with my in my in um, industry that I'm going into healthcare, they put a lot of this information in an Excel spreadsheet. When you were saying that that one that you mentioned in like the column,
Yep.
it's pulled out like that first like column, is that like usually the title like you have there? And so that's why we have to start on line two in a sense. If you can understand my question.
Yeah, so it depends on how they export it. So one of the big things with CSV files, so again, if you're going to healthcare and dealing with Excel, you'll deal with these, is so you can save an Excel spreadsheet or any of these spreadsheets as a dot CSV. So they can sit there and they can plug in whatever information that they want, and then they can save it as a CSV file. And then using Python, then you can then import that and then read through and do whatever you want to do. Whether this comes along for the ride, I do believe in Excel, there's like a setting, there's some kind of checkbox or whatever you have to check, basically to say, do you want to like export the title or whatever along with it? So hopefully, if you're getting information from people, you'll get this again. So it's just very easy to understand what the hell information you're dealing with. Um, that's how they export it. If they give it to you, they give it to you. If they don't give it to you, they don't give it to you. Right? That's just what they do. Yep. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Did you re? Does that make sense, John?
Thank you. I was like, it won't let me talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it did. The other part I had was um, when you were going over again the parsing and you said the number one. Can you go over that part one more? Yeah, when you said for record and file number one,
Yeah.
is that does that mean that that first line? Yeah, could you go over that one more time just to get a better understanding of it?
Yep. Okay.
That part right there.
Yeah, so when we do read lines, so we turn file into a list. So this is the list, every record is at a different index. So we do file one here. So basically what we were saying here is we want to start at index one. And this is where that whole 0 and 1 thing goes. So index one is actually record two. So, and this is where you have to be careful. Again, when we talk about garbage in, garbage out, or getting like soft fails because of your data. So if I'm importing CSV information like this, especially with things like age, right? I don't want to accidentally import actual age, right? If I want to know the average ages of all my people, 15 plus 50 plus 100 plus age plus 6, right? That's a bad thing. So, um, what we do here is what I'm saying is start at index one. So index zero is this first line. So I don't want that. I want to start with the first actual name. And again, that goes back to you fully understanding the data that's going to be provided to you so that you can write the script properly for how to parse that information. So like since I know this is what this data looks like, I can just what's called hard code. So I can hard code in to always skip line one because I know that line one should always be those column names. The issue for you is if some people give you column names and some people don't give you column names, that's where you may have to go in here and you do a for record, and then you could do an if statement. And basically, you could do an if you can turn index two, so age, if you can turn age into an int, then process the record. If you can't turn age into an int, basically skip the record. And that's where you would have to write the code for being able to understand the lines that are coming in and be able to spit out the lines that it should your code shouldn't process into your database or your data store, that type of thing. Yeah, so this is just saying start basically at line 2. And does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's why I'm here. Okay, so this is the final thing here. So split. So split. What split does is we split a string into a list based off of whatever we say. So CSV is going to be comma. You may hear of TSV, not used a lot. And it's called tab separated values. The other thing to be thinking about here is either hackers or just stupid crap. Again, something to think about, like how you're processing data. What happens? What happens if this person puts in that, right? What if they're typing into the little form to put in their information and they want to put will, comma, I ams because they think whatever, right? And then what if that gets put into your CSV file? Then what's going to happen is it's going to be Michelle is index 0, will is index 1, IAMS is now going to be index 2. And so how you deal with that is either you do things like form validation, basically before people put anything into whatever form you're dealing with, into your data store that you're dealing with, that it strips out this kind of thing. Or that's something for you to consider is you might want to use different separators in order to separate values. So you could do something like, I'm going to separate values based off of the 3 pipes. So I'm going to put 3 pipes together. And when I go to the parse, then I'm going to say wherever I see 3 pipes, I'm going to separate those values. And so again, that's where we get outside of what you technically need to do, and we get into that whole styling issue. And so that's something for you to consider, especially if users are going to be putting information into like the CSV file type of thing. And then you're going to have to be doing splits, coming up with separators or delimiters that users just would not do. Even if they were trying to be a complete pain in the ass, they wouldn't know what they were supposed to do. So that's one of those things to consider there. Let me clean this up so I don't screw up the rest of this. Okay. Everybody else good? Any questions? No questions? Okay. So that's parsing CSV files. Then we get to writing to files. Pretty simple. Again, we can do with, open, the file that we're writing to, W as file. So W is overwrite. You delete everything that was there and overwrite. A is append. You're going to append to the end. One of the things to be thinking about though, when you start writing to files, is you're going to have to start thinking about the user interface. Who is going to be reading whatever this information that you put out, and make sure you format it appropriately. So ASCII is basically text. So when you see this text on a screen, or you see text within like Notepad, like you open up a text file and you see that, that's basically ASCII formatting. So /n is next line, /t is tab, that type of thing. Or you have HTML. So most of the stuff that we're going to do once we start creating dynamic things is we're going to be outputting to an HTML document. And so you have to format that document appropriately, again, with HTML tags and CSS and all of that kind of stuff. Let's go take a look at the right. So this is the basic script here. We're gonna see how this works. Okay, so data. Okay, yeah, so this is going to give us a little user input. So data equals the input function, add a note. So with open, we're going to create a file called test.htmla. So we're going to append to the end of the file as file. And what we're going to do is file.write data. So as the data is, we're going to write the data to that file, and then we're going to see what it looks like. So if we do this a couple of times, so I'll run this, I'll do hello, then I'll run it again. I'll say world, and so I'll run it again and say hi class. Okay, so basically we sent hello, world, and hi class, and we sent that to the test.html file. If we go, so that should, again, that's going to go back to my working directory. And so that's where we have test.html here. So again, working directory is my home, my root directory, test.html. Since it's called .html, I can actually just double click this and it's going to open up within a web browser. So if you save something as a .html file, it'll automatically open up with Firefox, Chrome, Safari, whatever else. And we can see this. So this right here is in a web browser. And so it's going to try to show us based off of any HTML formatting that we have. I can go here and we can go to source. And this is going to show us the actual source text. And what we can see is when we printed the information into this file, right? So I put hello, and then right after hello, it put world, and then it put high class, right? Because I'm not putting any text formatting in, it's just simply putting it in the next spot. And so that may or may not be useful for what I'm trying to do. So what we can do here is I can go and I can simply do the next line deal, right? So comment that out. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to use an F string. So file.write, F, single quotation marks. I'll put in the value of data with a slash next line. So I'm going to put in the data, and then it'll do next line, and then it'll do next line, and then it'll do next line. So if I run this, I can say another test, and then I can run this again. Did this work? And then I can run this again, say, I hope this worked. And then what we can do is we can come back here and hit refresh. And so we can see another test was on the same line, right? Because the slash n was at the end of that F string. So it put that here, but then the slash n, did this work, slash n, I hope this worked. So since I'm using those next lines, it's now formatting it for text like this. Just to show you if this is a little confusing, again, we can just simply open this up with text edit. So just a normal text editor. And just to show you, you basically get the exact same thing. Right. And so this is what we're talking about, like I say, like with ASCII text. If you're going to be writing or outputting to a document that's going to get printed, if you're going to be outputting to any kind of just plain text document, this is the kind of thing that you're going to need to think about doing. If we go over then, if we're doing for a web page, what we can do is we can format for HTML. And again, this is why we're going to do the HTML and CSS class next week. So file.write, F string. We open with a p tag, we dump in the value of data, and we close with a p tag. Right? So for an HTML document, this will be on one line, and then on the line, another line, another line, another line. So if we run this, we can say HTML. This is a web page. Isn't the internet cool? Right now, so all of those should be wrapped in p tags. So when we come here, see, so this is all the text we put in before. So this is an important thing to understand how this formatting works. So this is ASCII formatting. Your web browser doesn't care about ASCII formatting, so that's all on one line. All of that is on one line because the web browser doesn't care. The web browser, what it cares about is HTML formatting. And so here's where we have the HTML formatting. So we have a p tag, HTML, close p tag. So that's one line. This is a web page, close p tag. That's another line. Isn't the internet cool? That's another line. But one of the things that you'll see here, and this is where you need to become like a real technology professional, is although this starts showing up appropriately on the web page, this very quickly is going to be very ugly to understand if you have to go into the source. So again, if you're going to be developing web applications, you're going to come to your web front end. It's not going to look how it's supposed to. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go to source. And if all you have is one long ass line of code, that is going to be very difficult and frustrating to try to figure out what to do with. So that's where you can add both HTML and ASCII formatting. So with this one, what we have is file.write. F, we're going to put it within an H1 tag just so we can see it's different. The value of data, close an H1 tag, and then we're going to do next line. So this formats for our web browser. This formats for the text editor. So if I run this now, I can say formatting is cool, but it can be a pain. Oh, are you still passionate? So now we should get the everything within the H1 tag. So we see that in the web browser. And when we go to source, we see the things on the next line. So we go here and we do a refresh. So formatting is cool in H1, but it can be a pain. Are you still passionate? So again, since we did the /n at the end, something to think about is that means it's at the end here. So the H1, because the next line doesn't happen until you give it a next line. So that was simply added to the end of that particular line, but then there's a /n here. So then we separate that out, a /n here, and we separate that out. So that kind of gives you a bit of an idea of the difference between the ASCII and the HTML formatting. And, that kind of shows you how it looks when you're trying to read this stuff. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there? Any questions with that? Is somebody riding a bike? That's awesome. Somebody's doing my class on a bicycle. God bless the modern world. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, so we got ASCII formatting, like I was talking about. So we got ASCII text formatting. Mainly when you're doing ASCII, it'll be /n or /t. /n is next line, /t is for tab. If we go to ASCII, this is something to show you again. We have a little bit of a data store here. So this is a list. So we have dictionaries within a list. Name is Bob, age is 19. Name is Sue, age is 10. Name is Phil, age is 33. Name is Sammy, age is 50. So we just have this here. Again, this could be getting pulled in from a CSV file. Oh yeah, that's yeah. So with open, we're going to open a file called ASCII.txt. We're going to open it with W, so it overwrites. We're going to say as file. We're going to say file.write students, next line. So it should have like a title of students, and then it goes to the next line. For student in name, so name is the list. So for each record, we're going to do file.write, f string. We're going to tab in, so /t, we'll tab in. We'll do student name. Then we'll do another tab, student age, and then we'll /n for next line. So I'll say students, then I'll tab in, name, age, name, age, name, age. And if we run this, that'll run. We go over here to ASCII.txt. So ASCII.txt just got created. I can open this up. And well, starts getting uglier the bigger you make it, but that's supposed to give you the idea. So we have student, so student, next line, tab in Bob, tab 19, tab in Sue, age 10, tab in Phil, age 33, tab in Sammy, 50. And so that's a way when you're creating these kind of like text reports, that's how you can try to keep everything in line so that it actually looks pretty. So if you're just printing out name and the age and everything else, that'll, if you don't do this kind of formatting, essentially at the end of the day, you're going to get something that looks like this, which is going to be a pain in the ass to read. And again, that's something to think about for your users, giving them something that's relatively easy to consume. Let's see here. And then the final bit, yeah, I guess I kind of already showed you this. Yeah, HTML formatting, CSS and JavaScript. So with Python, again, when you're writing to an HTML document, remember HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, all this is text, right? They're what are called client-side languages. So basically you send the text to the web browser then turns that text into that fancy web application that you're dealing with. And so basically when you're creating these dynamic documents with Python, you can write everything into those documents. So you can write the HTML, you can write the CSS, you can even write the JavaScript into those documents so that people are able to, get the nice, pretty dynamic website there. Jock. Yep.
So I understand a little bit of the HTML. So when we write it in HTML, we want to put it in formatting, but the ASCII, that's really for basically to take the information, the CSV file, and present it in a way so that someone, like for doing a report, to see it in a sense, as opposed to just sending an Excel file. I'm trying to wrap my head around why we would do ASCII formatting in the first place if we get a CSV file, we're just pulling information out.
Well, because it
If you
depends
get my
on like what kind of document you're going to be dynamically creating. So let's say maybe you're creating it like an ASCII email. So you're going to be sending out a very simple email. You could use the tabs and the next lines to format that properly with the values dynamically put in there. Again, if you're going to simply be putting out to a text file, again, this is a very, very simple text file, but you could have a very large report here. So let's say, again, if you're in the healthcare world or whatever, let's say you just want to put out a basic report that was going to be printed out. I don't know, the hours of all of your employees. So you want to put everybody's, oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, well, that one's Spectrum Internet. Don't buy Spectrum Internet, apparently. Yeah, go away. Anyways, like let's say you could have everybody's all the nurses' names plus the hours they've worked plus any kind of additional information. You could have that basically in a text file like this. That's something like a report that might get printed every day. We used to have reports that they printed out on the printer for whatever reason. And so basically with ASCII, it's just one of those things that you need to ask your users and you need to figure out is how are they going to be consuming the information? And then based off of how they're going to consume the information, then you determine how you're going to print it out, right? So if they're going to get everything through Excel, then you can output directly to a CSV file, and you can simply hand them the CSV file. When they open it up, it'll pop up in a spreadsheet. So if they're using spreadsheets, maybe that's the way to go. Again, that's the whole, what your environment is. That'll be the question. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. And so also let one more thing.
Yep.
When we're just, I guess printing to an HTML file, I know we're going to go over next week, but if users are putting in information into a file that's in the same sense, do we still kind of like use that same formatting if users are putting in information into a file like a HTML file? Do we kind of format the same way in a sense, or is it a little different? Or should I just wait till next week to get that kind of information?
Yeah, well, so basically what
For
happens with
and
HTML, we'll go over it a little bit, but that's where you have multiple languages that come together. So you create an HTML form. That HTML form has text boxes or text areas or radio buttons or whatever else. When you click the submit button, there's an action value, and that actually sends all of that information to a script. So a Python script, a PHP script, a Ruby on Rails script. And then basically, when that script gets a hold of it, then you, as the coder, decides what happens with the information. So all of the information that comes in is tagged with a name. So first name, this is like we'll say name equals first name, last name equals last name, age, right? Anyways, that information comes in and it's tagged. And with that, you then get to decide what you want to do with it. So you could do a SQL statement, so that gets inserted into a database. You could basically you could write to a CSV file. So you could say first name, comma, last name, comma, blah, blah, blah. Basically, again, that's going to be another one of those. You get to decide what to do with it. Okay, so for everybody, one, raise your hand, and then two, don't mute yourself until we're done because I have to keep asking to unmute you. So if I haven't finished your question yet, just stay unmuted. That makes sense, Jack?
yes, so but and as so, but when we think about when we create our because we're basically have a CSV file, but we want to write to it,
Yep.
and that's where I was trying to see like we want to put how you had it here. Hold on, I'm trying to going back over your notes. Um, we want to put it so that they can write to their own CSV file and add to it like a pin to the end in a sense. So we put on top of it our file in a sense. I'm just trying to understand the concept of how we're going to put these together. So if we're trying to create a CSV file from an HTML platform, we want to design it so that they can add to the file, continually building the file, and building CSV file in a sense, correct?
Yeah. One, I will say, be careful. Again, all of this stuff has its own use case. Databases are a beautiful thing. You probably want a database, but yeah. So guys can see that. Yeah. So basically, yeah. So it's, you have your HTML form here with name, let's say age, right? So when there's an action um, value here, and it'll say what script to send it to. So it might be like input.py, let's say. So it'll take this information, it'll send it to the input.py script. And so name will equal whatever name, age will equal whatever age, so on and so forth. Then what you can do is you can take those values of name and use that F string, and then you can do comma, and then you can do age, and then you do comma, and then, whatever additional information, and then you add a slash n, so it's next line. And basically, with this, you can then say, write this as an append to my CSV file. So you have, whatever CSV file. And so as information comes in, this will continuously get put to the end of that CSV file.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'll try to remember that by next week when we
Yeah,
go
that's fine.
over it.
Again, you guys got to play with it. The one thing that it will caution you, again, there's teaching you folks stuff and there's production environment. So if all you're doing is adding to a file, and especially if it's human adding to a file, a CSV file should be fine. Again, remember, if you have a computer adding to a file, a computer can add to a file literally as quickly as a CPU spins. So one of the problems you can run into is things like log files, where you can literally end up having like 5 gig log files. I used to have servers that would crash simply because their log files would get too big. They just process, right? So one thing to be concerned about is when you're doing this to simply a CSV file, you literally can end up getting 2 gig files that can cause you problems. The other thing is if you're going to be editing information. So, all right, so we have all these records here. And if I want to append, I'll just append to the end. If I wanted to do any kind of editing though, you can edit, right? So I can add all of this to a variable value. And then basically through some code, like I could edit somebody's age. So let's say Michelle's supposed to be 40 instead of 35. We could create a system where you could modify just that one little value out of this entire file. The issue that you run into if you start doing editing is all of this has to get pulled into your script as a variable value. You then modify that variable value and then you overwrite. So this document that previously existed, you're going to take your new variable value and you're going to overwrite this, which 99.9999% of the time should be fine. You should, as you'll hear this a lot in the technology world, have no problems with it. Here's the thing. If there's a quirk, right? Have you heard of file corruption? One of the things that can happen is if you open this file, you grab all this information, you do whatever you're doing with it in the Python script, and then something weird happens. Something else tries to access this file, whatever else, wonkiness, right? What can happen is you can end up deleting all the information in this file, but then when your script goes back to write to the file that you just essentially deleted, for some reason that write won't function properly, and basically everything in your file just went bye-bye. That's what we're talking about. Sometimes we're talking about data corruption, especially with things like CSV files. So that's where you're gonna have to be really careful. When you're dealing with CSV files as a data store, they can get too big. If you're doing it manually, should be fine. It's more when you start getting to this issue of actually editing things in here, and especially with a large file, that's where you can get into some quirkiness. So if you use a CSV file just for some options, again, you create a web app, you just want them to be able to modify a couple of things, and basically store those variable values. CSV files are great. Once you start talking about hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of records, especially, uh, you know, you can run into some issues. So yeah, be careful with that. Be careful with that. Did any of that make
Thank
sense?
you.
Yeah. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. So yeah, so with that, we have the labs. So the final lab for today, so you can basically start playing with this, is we have the sensor lab. So put this here. And so this is an interesting one. So basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be simulating creating a dashboard for a sensor. Again, one of the big things in the technology world, and one of the things you folks should be thinking about how you can bring this to the non-technology world, is the idea of having a single pane of glass. So when we talk about single panes of glass, is basically this is a dashboard where an administrator or whatever can just take a look at a screen like this, and all of the relevant information about their environment is up there with any kind of like warning lights or whatever to tell them that there's a problem, right? So again, if I'm a systems engineer or whatever, I can look and I can see, all the CPU percentages for all my servers. I can see, make sure I can ping all the different data centers that I care about. All that kind of information can be on this like single pane of glass. So basically what this does is this is just creating a little temperature dashboard so we can start to get the idea of what this kind of thing looks like. So with this, we're going to use two modules this time. So from random, so random module gives us the ability to do random stuff. We're going to import the rand_int function. And from time, we're going to import the sleep function. So again, we're going to do a while true loop. So this thing is just going to keep going, 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 going. So sometimes you want to slow that down a little bit. So we're going to make it sleep. So while true, this is just going to continuously go. So temperature is going to equal a rand_int between 0 to 100. So this is just giving us a value to come in so that we can do an if-else statement off of. Color is going to equal nothing. So this is where we're going to start getting to CSS down here. So if temp is greater than or equal to 80, so if it's 80 or above, color will be red. Oh no, it's too hot. If temperature is less than 80 and temperature is greater or equal to 50, color equals green, as in that's a reasonable temperature. Else, So it's something else. Color equals blue, so it's too cold. Um, we're going to come down here. We're going to say with open. So we're going to open a file, sensor.html. We are going to overwrite W as file. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to file.write. And this right here is in what's called an HTML meta tag. We'll talk about this a little bit next week. But basically what this is going to do is it's going to auto refresh the page every 5 seconds. So on its own, you can open this page and then every 5 seconds, it's going to auto refresh itself. And so what's happening is this script is going to continuously be rewriting this page, and the page itself is going to auto refresh itself. And so you're going to get a nice little dynamic page going on. File.write. So this is the first file write. File.write, we do an F string. We do a P tag. So the P tag is just paragraph in HTML. Style equals. So font size is going to be 300. So this is CSS. So it's going to be a big number. Semicolon. Background color is going to equal whatever this color is. So whether it's red, green, or blue, that is going to be the background color. And just so you see, this is word wrap. People sometimes get confused about word wrap. It's just word wrap. Then what we're going to do is we're going to close that. We're going to put in the value of the temperature. So whatever the value of the temperature is within the P tags, that's actually going to show up on the screen. So this right here is going to be in the source. You're not going to see it. It's just formatting. This is what's actually going to show up on the web page. And then I'm going to print out on the console here what the temperature is, /T for tab, and what the current color is, just from a troubleshooting standard. And then we're going to sleep for 2 seconds. So if I do this, so we can see it's 61 green, 31 blue, 7 blue, right? So this is telling me I'm getting a temperature value, and an if-else statement seems to be working properly. Then I can go over to my root, whatever my root is, and we can see it just created sensor.html. I can double click on this. So it's 96 with a red background, 7 with a blue background, 74 with a green background, right? So again, incredibly, stupidly simple, but that kind of gives you the idea of how you can use Python to dynamically create a report like this and something that might be useful. Again, it can be pulling this information, so it could be doing ping commands. So that's one of the things we'll do in the future is, again, like a network testing app. So you could be pinging all of these different websites, and then it could say here like Google is green, but Facebook is red, right? And so that can show you that. Or we can be pulling in different values from different things, and then we can create a very simple dashboard. And so again, I walk into my office and I can see what's going on and know there's a problem before my users start complaining about things. So that is the sensor lab. Then we have the note lab. This kind of goes along with the whole CSV file thing. So this is where you can just create new notes, right? So file name equals note.html. So you can put in variables here that will plug in that variable value. So with open file name as write as file, file.write h1 note app, close h1, next line. So basically, when I run this script for the first time, what I wanted to do is I wanted to overwrite everything that was previously on the page, and then basically put this as a title. And then while true, update equals input, add an update, whatever your update wants to be, with open file name, A. So now we're going to append, we're going to add as file, we're going to write P, update, close P, in. So basically this is going to give us a nice little note-taking HTML app. So I can run this. I can say this is a note. And I can say programming is annoying, and there's stuff on my mind, whatever. basically, again, you can keep putting in these notes. And if we go over here, we're going to see no HTML was created. And I can double click on this. And so we can see H1. We can see H1 note app. This is a note. Programming is annoying. Other stuff on my mind. All right. And again, it's just a very basic thing. I can say something else, hit enter, and right. Then it will update here. And again, that's where you can have kind of like that note. And again, like we talked about the CSV file, you could put in additional information here, everything separated by a comma, if you wanted to. And then the final lab for you folks to do is the search. And so what this is going to do is this is going to allow you to create an incredibly basic record system. All right. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to add basically records into the system, and then you're going to be able to do a very simple search. Um, so while true, we're going to start it with a continuous loop. Command equals input function, new or search. So if you want to create a new record, you type in new, and it'll ask you for a new, you'll put in the information for the new record, and it will write to the file. Or if you want to do a search, what it'll do is it'll ask you for what you want to search based off of, and then it will try to find that, right? So while true, command equals input. If command equals new, so equals new, name equals input name, age equals input age. With open record.txt as file write dot write. So we're going to write to this variable. We're going to do f string, value of name, comma, value of age, next line. So you can actually save this as a CSV file. So instead of doing record.txt, you could actually do this record.csv, and then it would open up as a spreadsheet if you wanted it to. And then what we do have here for search is if command equals search, query equals input query. So what your query is with open record.txt, so the same file, R, right? So it's R, we only want to read, as file read, file read dot read lines. So we're going to read this file basically as a list for record in file read, if query in record. So basically, if the question that you're asking, if the thing you're asking for is in that record, record equals record dot split. So this is a string. We're then going to split it into its own list. We're going to print record index 0. So we're going to print the name /t, and then we're going to print the age. If we go and we run this, oops, close that. So we go and run this. So it says, new or search. So I'll say new. It says name. So I say Frank, age 77. Then it goes back to new or search. And I can say, oh no, I can say new, name, Poppy, age, I don't know, 44. Says new or search, right? It just keeps going back. So now I can do search and query. So what am I looking for? And again, I think Bob might be in there. So I do Bob. No, Bob wasn't in there. Search. Oh, because I just created this again. Okay, so anyways, now I can do Frank. And so it gives me Frank, his age of 77. Again, an incredibly basic system. So if I do new, and I can do a Franny, who's 19. Then if I do search, I can simply put F in, and it'll give me either Frank or Franny. Again, a very basic little search routine here. But this kind of starts to give you an idea of how these kind of mechanisms work. Again, do not put this into a production environment. This is a learning type thing. Are there any questions with the labs or with the rest of the class? That is the class. So I'll let you guys plug along with the labs if that's what you want to do. I will have to leave in a little bit, but I'm here for a little bit longer. Any questions from anybody? No questions. Yeah, I got a big ass chat going on. Jock again. Yep.
So we're this is a question I had last night because I was trying to do the last, but I guess you got to answer it. If we want to do this in, so we're doing this in Visual Studio Code, but if we want to do this on a terminal, would that be a bad thing?
What do you mean by on a
Not
terminal?
really. Like you're using a MacBook, so if you did a MacBook terminal, it wouldn't work the same way in a sense because it's kind of like learning.
Well, no, so okay,
If you
so all this is ASCII. All this is ASCII. So God help you. You could you could type all this crap out in a text editor if you wanted to. That's how I learned to code. I literally learned to code with Notepad back in the day. So yeah, you could do that. So anything that allows you to save ASCII text, right? That will you can code on that. The thing is, why VS Code is useful, and really any IDE, is you get all of this pretty stuff. So again, like when I used to code like with PHP, all you got is black and white text. So if you forgot a comma, if you forgot something, God help you figuring out where it was. Why VS Code is useful is I like with all of these colors and all this stuff. I don't do that. It's automatically doing that for me. So it becomes much easier to figure out, frankly, where the hell I screwed up. Um, so basically, so that's why you use an IDE. Over again a text editor at this point. The reason I prefer you folks use VS Code, so there are other IDEs out there. I'm not quibbling about any other IDE. The thing is, especially as we get into more complicated projects for these classes, as we've done before, I want you to be able to share your screen. So if you run into a problem, I can help you. And basically, I know what this is supposed to look like. Like I know these colors. So if if you were using a different IDE and you pulled it up, I'd still try to help you, but then I'd be learning what the hell your IDE is saying. So that's why VS Code is kind of what I push you guys towards, at least here for the class. You just need something that writes and saves into ASCII.
okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so I gotta go pick my puppy up at doggy daycare. Anybody have any questions? Last times for the questions. We're gonna be done. Questions, questions, questions. No questions. Okay. Yeah, no questions. So yeah, so Tuesday we're going to have the HTML class. Thursday we're gonna have the CSS class. I will give you a warning. Meetup sucks. Meetup is just such a bad platform. So I'll probably be sending out an email before the HTML class to give you the proper Zoom link to be actually be able to attend that class because whatever. I can't for some reason I can't edit the damn Zoom link in the meetup. So that's its own weird thing. So yes, you might be getting that. So if you use the Zoom link that's in meetup and it doesn't work, look for the email. And with that, as always, been pretty fun. So yeah, see you guys later.